Welcome you all to this session and welcome Varun for joining us today. Varun has been on a similar webinar last year, almost about a year ago, with both Pranav, CEO of Coacharya, and myself. Varun is the Dean of Religious Life in University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And he graduated from Tufts, then Harvard. Then he went on to South Africa, and from the University of Cape Town, he got his PhD. In between, he also got his law degree as a JD from the University of Chicago. So he's multiple things. He just now told me that I thought he was a millennial because I thought my son is still a millennial. Probably he's not too, but they are both Gen Xs, and their daughters are in the same school, in the same class. Both of them are interested in music. And he is a scholar, a professor, someone to do with religion, like a chaplain. And he's also a lawyer. He's a practicing lawyer. He's on the Californian Law Board. And several other things, speaker, and I'm sure he's working on his book. We can talk about what he's working on. So far, he hasn't, as far as I know, published a book, but several blogs. And he works with people like Deepak Chopra on the spiritual side, many other people, thinkers of this world. He was the one who introduced us to Dr. Lisa Miller, who spoke on the first day on the Awakened Brain, a book that remarkably impressed me and brought on to this forum. So today we have Varun here. Welcome, Varun.
Thank you.
And Varun, I know that you've been through a pretty stressful 2 weeks at the university, like many other universities in the United States have been, with the student process and so on and so forth. But Pranav had sent me a video about the graduation ceremony, in which you spoke very eloquently, opened up the graduation ceremony for this huge graduating class. And there you said something about the major crisis that is facing us today, not the traditional crises of wealth, health, etc., but one of joy. You said the crisis of joy is the greatest crisis at this point in time. Could we start elaborating on that first before we move on to other stuff?
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's so great to join you again. It's wonderful to see people from all over the world on this call. It's really a critical conversation, so I'm really very grateful to be a part of it. I'm still processing the pain of the last year. You can imagine how difficult it has been, given what you've probably been reading about. In my job at USC, I oversee religious life, which includes Muslim life and Jewish life. And so this has been the hardest year of my career ever since October 7th. It's been a real challenge in so many different ways. And the last month especially has been very painful. That said, in my role as essentially the university's chaplain, I get to sit in spaces that most people don't get to sit in. And all year I was sitting in quiet, small, intimate spaces with Jewish, Israeli, with my Jewish and Israeli students, faculty, and staff. And I was sitting in small, quiet, intimate spaces with Muslim, Palestinian, and Arab student, faculty, and staff. And in those conversations, I got to see things that probably most people don't see. Most people see how the politics are divisive and how people disagree fundamentally on core issues. But what I saw in those spaces was that even if the politics were divisive, the pain was shared. And in both spaces, I saw the same 5 human emotions this year. And if you didn't tell me who was in which room, I wouldn't know, because the emotions were the exact same and the way people felt were the exact same. Those 5 emotions were grief, abandonment, anger, fear, and exhaustion. And in both in both communities, I found the same 5 emotions. And so I began to think about how, even though what we see publicly is the way the politics divide us, What I see privately is the way the pain unites us. And so as chaplain, I was trying to operate from the point of feeling as opposed to fact, from the point of emotionality, from the shared human experience of pain that we're all going through at this particular moment. And yet what I also realize is that our sort of aspirations as fully realized humans is to turn fear into love and to turn pain into joy. What connects us as human beings, and this is what Buddha taught, his first noble truth is that it's often translated as life is suffering, but actually it is there is suffering. So the first noble truth is there is suffering. That means to live is to suffer. That means suffering is baseline. So what the Buddha taught is that what it means to be human is for all of us to suffer. But what he also taught is that what it means to be human is that none of us want to suffer. And so as humans, we can feel as though we are connected to each other in the sense that we have a shared experience of suffering, but we're also connected to each other in the sense that we have an aspiration to move beyond suffering. And so I was talking to my teacher, Deepak Chopra, about this, and he told me, I steal everything from him. I steal from the best. He told me that there are 5 major crises in the world today. He said the first 4 crises are the crises we all know about, and they're the crises that all of us at universities and in the world and at Coacharya are trying to solve. The crisis of war, the crisis of justice, the crisis of health, and the crisis of sustainability. So those are 4 crises we all know about. We're all trying to be a part of the solution to those crises, not part of the problem. The 5th crisis, though, he said, is the most important, the least understood, the one that all of us have to solve together. If we don't solve it together, we can't solve it. And we can't solve the other 4 crises unless we solve this crisis. And he said this 5th crisis is the crisis of joy. And that really resonated with me because of what I had seen in terms of my own campus crises and the connection around pain, but also around the aspiration to joy. And so what I've tried to do over the last few months is just try to be an evangelist for joy at a time when very few people are in a place where very few people are. And to be unapologetic about that, to say to my students that joy is your birthright. It's what it means to be human. And to cultivate joy in your life is an act of defiance in a culture that wants to keep us exhausted, burnt out, outraged, and anxious. Cultivating joy is our act of defiance, and it's a critical lifeline, a protective factor, and sort of a shared aspiration of what it means to be human. And so I think because I went through this experience where I saw so much pain on college campuses, and I saw that as a connective sort of tissue or fiber, and I saw all of us struggling with our desire to get beyond that pain, I became sort of laser focused on joy. And I want to give students permission to feel joy even and especially during the most difficult moments. I saw a sign in one of at a protest at a college a few months ago. A student was holding, and that sign said, "Joy is canceled." And that kind of broke my heart, honestly, because even if you look at social justice movements throughout time, regardless of what your cause might be, there's joy in those movements. There was joy in the Indian nationalist movement that my grandparents and great grandparents were participating in. There was joy in the anti-apartheid movements that my wife's parents and grandparents were participating in South Africa. There is often joy in social justice movements because social justice movements often come out of spiritual community. Every major social justice movement in the United States has come from the church in one way or another, whether it's the abolition of slavery, whether it's environmental rights, women's rights, whatever justice movement we have had in the United States has come out of spiritual community. And I'm concerned that young people who are mostly now disaffiliated with religion in the United States are engaging in social justice advocacy without spiritual community. And if we don't have spiritual community in the trenches, it's hard to see ourselves in each other. It's hard to have empathy for the other. It's hard to see how we're part of a larger whole. And it's hard to cultivate joy as a protective factor against the fear, anxiety, and outrage of the world. And so that's kind of what I've been focused on as sort of a remedy for all the pain that I've seen, is just trying to be someone who evangelizes joy, someone who normalizes joy, and someone who gives permission for students to feel joy, especially at a time when they feel like they can't.
Yeah. Thanks, Varun. I think that's it's deeply moving at a level where there is so much of, as you already put it, the feeling of grief, anger, abandonment, frustration, and so on. And the only solution, totally agree with you, joy, happiness, love, compassion, etc. And today, amongst the leaders that I see of any type, the one person who projects it in a most brilliant manner is Holiness the Dalai Lama. And you spoke about Buddha. And I know that from your background that you spent time at the Buddhist monastery in Bodh Gaya. So but at the same time, it's ironical that on the one level, Buddha talked about the suffering, and the remedy for that is joy. And of course, he talked about multiple other things like the sunya, the void, and so on and so forth. So how do you connect these both in this particular specific reference of the Buddhism as well as other religions that you are experienced in?
I think that, what we have to differentiate is joy and happiness. When His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is, I consider him to be my guru, my root guru. I got to meet him when I was 20. I've got to spend a lot of time with him. My daughter's named after him, Tenzin. So, he's my guru too. Deepak and the Dalai Lama are my two guys. I'm very lucky to have been able to sit at both of their feet. And when His Holiness the Dalai Lama wrote a book with his dear friend Desmond Tutu, Archbishop in South Africa. These are two Nobel Peace Prize winners, by the way, who have experienced suffering in the way that very few people in the 20th century have experienced it. The Dalai Lama saw the suffering of the Tibetan people and has spent most of his life in exile. And of course, Desmond Tutu saw the suffering of South Africans under apartheid and led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to sort of move past that. And so these are two people who have experienced intense suffering in the world, intense pain, and yet they're very close friends. They're Nobel Peace Prize laureates. I'm sorry, just a second. And yet when they got together to write a book, they didn't call their book the Book of Happiness. They called their book the Book of Joy. And so you wonder how these two people who have seen so much suffering, who have been the recipients of so much pain, who have been the leaders of people who have gone through immeasurable amounts of pain, how they could write a book called the Book of Joy. And when you hang out with the Dalai Lama or you hang out with Desmond Tutu, there's a lot of laughter. They're basically just laughing when they hang out with each other. And you wonder how people who have seen so much suffering could find a way to laughter. And I think it's because they differentiate happiness and joy. Happiness to me is based on the external conditions of the world. And that's why it's fleeting. I buy a car, I'm happy. I crash my car, I'm sad, right? Oftentimes when we think of happiness, we're chasing the thing that we don't control. And because happiness is based on stuff that are external to us that we might not control, then we have ceded control over our own well-being to other gatekeepers. We are not the gatekeepers of the way we feel at that point. If all my happiness is based on who wins the election, then I have no control over if I'm happy. If all my happiness is based on if the person I like likes me back, if the employer I like gives me a job, if the teacher I like gives me the right grade, if all my happiness is based on the things I cannot control, then I have no path to my own happiness. Joy, I think, is internally generated. Joy is based on the things that we can control. Joy can happen regardless of the external conditions of the world. And that's why I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu talk about joy, because one is a Buddhist leader and one is a Christian leader. They come from wisdom traditions that have spiritual technologies on how to cultivate joy internally. And that's what they teach people. And so when you think about joy, you think about the things you can control. And what you realize over time is that the things that you can control are way more important than the things you can't control. And actually, the things you can control are the most important things in your life and are the most important things in terms of cultivating joy. So what can you control? Well, you can control what you eat. You can control how much you sleep. You can control how much you exercise. You can control how you commune with nature. You can control your values, your hopes, your dreams, your ethics. You control who you hang out with, who your friends are. You can control how you judge or don't judge others. You can control how creative you are, how collaborative you are, how much compassion you have, how you serve others. You can control how many times you tell the people you love that you love them. There's nothing more important than those things. And yet, in trying to find happiness in the external conditions of the world, we often undermine our own ability to cultivate joy in the internal conditions of our own being. And so when I look at His Holiness, when I look at Desmond Tutu, when I think about what the Buddha taught, The Buddha taught that we are the ones who create our own suffering, and that we're the ones who can mitigate our own suffering by the way we see the world. And in doing so, what I think ultimately I want our students to know and young people to know, especially my students who are type A students who have always got A's in their life, who are at USC because it's one of the best universities in the world, is that everything we're teaching you is about skill set. And yet what's way more important than your skill set is your mindset, right? And you control your mindset. And that is your superpower. And if you can control your mindset, and if you can privilege your mindset, then you can control the internal conditions that allow you to cultivate joy in your own life. And so I want the cultivation of joy to be an empowering act. I want it to be a part of justice. I don't want us to think that, oh, if we have joy, then we don't care about justice. I want it to be a precondition to justice. And when, like I said, when you look at these two great Nobel Peace Prize laureates, they've experienced more suffering than any two people you will ever meet. And yet they've cultivated more joy than any two people you'll ever meet. And it's because they've cultivated joy that they were able to lead in the way that they did.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, the Dalai Lama is one person. I've never seen him in person, only on movies and videos. And just to look at him, just to see him laugh, is to feel a presence that is extraordinarily empowering and joyful. So perhaps, yeah, they should call you the Dean of Joy rather
I
than
would
Dean
like
of
that
Religious.
actually. I
Yeah.
would like that.
And I was
If I had
also,
my way, I would I would create a position called Vice President of Joy, and that's what I would want to do at USC, just to be upstream. Because what happens is that we all get sucked into crisis management. We all get sucked downstream. We're all just trying to triage crisis and then move to the next crisis. And even though my job is in religious and spiritual life, 95% of my job this year has been downstream crisis management. But unless we're working upstream to make sure people don't get into the river to begin with and go into crisis to begin with, then we're not really solving any problems. We're just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic as it goes down. We're not solving the hole in the boat itself. And so I tend to try to think upstream. I want to look at how we mitigate crises, mitigate suffering, as opposed to how we remedy it when it already happens, because there's too much downstream crisis to triage. And the real opportunity is to go upstream and empower people to not be in crisis, to empower people to be sort of the authors of their own joy, as opposed to trying to triage what happens when everything goes wrong. And so I think if we're really trying to solve the crisis of joy, we need people who are upstreamists, who are totally focused on root causes, not downstream crisis management people. We need that, obviously. We have those. What we don't have are the upstreamists. We don't have people who are making sure people don't get into the river to begin with. We're giving people tools, techniques, perspectives, practices, and resources to be empowered in their own meaning making and community building. And if you are meaning making and community building, then that is the remedy to crisis. And so that's where I'd like to live. I'd like to live upstream. And I think that's what coaching can do. At its best, coaching is an upstream intervention that empowers people to not go downstream into crisis, especially when you think about self-coaching, right? And so I want, but it's hard. It's hard to prove a negative. That's why it's hard to do upstream work. It's hard for me to say, because I built the biggest mindfulness program in the country, I have less people who are in crisis. I know it's true, but I can't prove the negative. And so when you're thinking about funding or measurable outcomes, it's easier to fund or measure outcomes of crisis than it is to fund or measure outcomes of crisis averted. And because of that, we have a funding structure that's focused on measurable outcomes that tends to focus entirely on downstream interventions as opposed to upstream opportunities. But unless we're working upstream, we can never actually solve the downstream crises. And so I'd like to encourage all of us to think what it really means to work upstream, to be an upstreamist, to work at the root causes, not to just deal with the afflictions or the ailments of the problem, but to deal with the root causes of those problems. And in doing so, that's where we actually create change, because we create change makers. We don't just triage people in crisis. We create upstreamists who are going to create the conditions that make sure people don't get into the river and go downstream to begin with.
Yeah. Thanks, Varun. I'll come back to this particular aspect in a moment. Before that, I have a question. Well, what I would like to come back is that you said uh, proving the negative is difficult. And therefore, even if you run the most brilliant program, mindfulness or what we call mindfreeness, and at the end of it, how do you evidence that? And that's really in coaching a little bit more I would like to explore with you, because in all coaching, the starting point is creating an intent. What is that state of being mindful or mind-free, etc.? What does it mean, and what does it contribute, and moving towards that? But before that, the question that really have is one of the challenges that I find, which was for me as well, and for many others, and many others are still going through it, is as we try to move upstream from the crisis management, the triage, as you put it, to something much more powerful in terms of solutioning state, we often run into this conflict between religion and spirituality. And for many people like me, and yesterday we were speaking with Dr. Dana Zohar, who's a quantum specialist, spirituality, intelligence, and all that stuff. And she said she lost faith in religion at the age of 13. I probably lost faith in religion at about the same age. But I regained my faith in spirituality. So someone who specializes in this subject, and your school is called the School of Religious and Spiritual Life, and you are titled as Dean of Religious Life, the spirituality is left out of it for some reason. And like we now said that you want to be the VP of Joy. So how do these come together, religion, spirituality, and joy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my new title is Dean of Religious and Spiritual Life. Actually, it's just maybe not on the website. So I think that was an intentional shift. We moved from the Office of Religious Life to the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life because only 50% of our students are religious, but 75% of our students say they're spiritual. And so in the age of those who are rapidly not affiliating with religion, having the language of spirituality allows us to still engage students in the things that religion has traditionally engaged students in, right? And so what we now is in 1950, 2% of Americans were not affiliated with religion. Today, 25% of Americans are not affiliated with religion. That's the fastest growing religious demographic in the United States, those who are not affiliated with religion. It's not Christianity, it's not Islam, it's not any major religion, it's the non-affiliation. But what's really sort of fascinating and dramatic for us is that for our first year college students, 51% are not affiliated with religion. And so think about this, 5% of grandparents, 50% of grandchildren not affiliated with religion. That's a massive shift in 2 generations in the United States. We are moving from a country that is traditionally religious to a country that will be predominantly not religious. That's just the way it's happened, and it's happening faster than anyone could have predicted. And so, but what I find is that when students walk away from religion, and by the way, students walk away from religion for a number of reasons. One is because they might not have been raised with religion, but the other is because they feel as though religion is hypocritical. Many students feel as though religion says one thing and does something else. Their experience of religion across their life has been religion is a place of violence and terrorism and casteism and anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and misogyny and, and covering up of child abuse, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all of which is true. But religion is also a place of liberation theology, social services, hospitals, universities, Seva, Lunger, like that's also true, but that's not what students see. They see sort of the dark side of religion. But when they leave religion, they don't leave behind meaning making, community building. They don't leave behind the questions of who am I and what does my life mean? And they don't leave behind the oftentimes the desire to have a relationship with God. Just because you leave religion doesn't mean you leave God behind. And so we are trying to help students think about in an age where religion is no longer a protective factor for them. Lisa Miller wrote this great book called The Spiritual Child, the most important book I read as a parent, where she says, if you have an intergenerational religious or spiritual experience growing up, that means if you go to temple or gurdwara or masjid or synagogue or church with your parents or grandparents growing up, you're 70% less likely to experience depression as a young adult. Right now, we have the highest levels of religious disaffiliation we've ever had with young people, and we have the highest levels of depression we've ever had with young people. I see that. And so I see that religion has provided historically a protective factor for young people, even if they're not religious, that helps them when they're young adults in terms of depression, anxiety, etc. And so what I want for students is to have the protective factors that religion has historically provided the generations, even if religion is not providing that to them. So what I encourage young people to think about is, what is sacred to you? I think we all need something sacred to us. It doesn't have to be traditional religion. It doesn't even have to be God. Maybe it's sports, maybe it's hip hop. It doesn't matter what it is. It just matters that it's sacred to young people. It matters that young people have something to wake up to, not just something that keeps them up, something that gets them up, that they have a North Star, that they have something exciting that gets them out of bed every morning. And so I want students to think about how they can come up with something sacred to them, how they can build a story around that, how they can build a ritual around that, how they can build a community around that, how they can honor that in some way. Maybe, like I said, maybe it's sports, maybe your religion is basketball. That's fine. Then go to a basketball game with the idea that this is a sacred moment for me, that this is a place of meaning making, that this is a sacred community for me, that I am participating in multi-generational storytelling, that there is awe and there is, if you've ever been to a cricket game, it feels like religion, right? And so why not lean into that? Why not fully embrace that? Deepak Chopra's son, Gautam Chopra, is my best friend. I helped him start his company with Tom Brady called The Religion of Sports. And our conceit is that sports is the new religion. Organized sports is the new organized religion. And the thing that people used to send their kids to church for, they're now sending their kids to the soccer field for, to learn how to play nicely, to learn how to play with ethics and value and collaboratively and creatively, etc. And so what we do is we produce all sorts of content with Tom Brady and LeBron James, and we did something with Sachin, and we did something with Simone Biles, and we did something with Serena. And the whole point is to think with these incredible athletes who everyone respects about the spiritual aspects of what it means to play games, to play sport, to be part of a team, to be part of a community that's oriented around a goal that's bigger than yourself, right? And so I think the spirituality aspect gives me a language to talk to young people who have largely rejected traditional religion, but allows me to encourage them to, even if you reject religion or God, to find something sacred in your life and to honor it as sacred, because what it means to be human is to have something that we wake up for.
Thanks, Varun. I really love that part about, what you love becomes your religion. In fact, I recall this famous parable of Ramakrishna. You might have heard of that. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. There was this old cantankerous old woman who came to him and said, look, you keep talking about this love for Kali as your mother. And I look at her figure and she's, dark and she's eating flesh and mouth is bloody. And all that I feel is revulsion. And how I don't even know how you can sort of reverse such an entity. And Ramakrishna said simply, don't worry about that, mother. Is there anyone in this world that you love that you could show unconditional affection for? She thought for a moment and she said, yeah, I have this little niece or nephew, about 3 years old, 4 years old. I love that kid a lot. She said, okay, for the next 2 weeks, just focus all your love and affection on this child and then come back to me. And she came back 2 weeks later crying and said, now I started loving Kali as well. And it's just a matter of finding that particular anchor for you to love and be able to transfer it in psychological terms as a transference to somebody else. So I'll just see if there are any questions, Varun. There are a couple of them here. Somebody said, from the perspective, tend to be She said, similar perspective I heard from another keynote speaker this week, Dr. Lisa Miller, in one of her videos. She's saying, religion and spirituality are different, but an attempt to be inclusive. We have even stopped discussing religion, which ironically has led to exclusion as we refrain from knowing each other in a deeper way, resulting in a spiritually non-conversant society. Any reflections on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's the way we encounter young people today, where they see religion as something exclusive, spirituality is something inclusive. The way Deepak talks about it is, I think, really helpful. He says that religion is someone else's experience and spirituality is your own experience, right? So religion is what we read about in our great wisdom texts. It's the experiences of the great avatars or prophets or sages or, gurus or messiahs. It's the experience that other people have had of the world. Spirituality is your own empirical experience of the world. It's how you make sense of the world. It's how you find meaning, community, joy, transcendence, awe, etc. And so I think that in this day and age where people are more likely to center their own experience of the world as opposed to the so-called experts, um, it makes it, it makes it a little clearer as to why spirituality has become the currency of young people more than religion has, because spirituality is resonating with how they experience the world in a way that religion is almost something that they have to have faith in. Spirituality is something that they just honor as their own experience. If it's not happening to you, then it doesn't matter. And so I think what spirituality does is it honors the experience that people are having. It's not telling them that they're not having that experience or that they should be having a different experience. And I think young people have moved from looking to expertise in a vertical way to looking at expertise in a horizontal way. What do I mean by that? Young people don't go to people because they're experts anymore. They don't come see me because I'm a dean. They don't go see the rabbi because the rabbi is a rabbi. They don't go see the the priest because the priest is a priest or the imam is the imam. The title doesn't matter. They will come see me if their friends tell me to come see me, or if their friends think that I have something to offer. They're more likely to listen to their friends. It's more peer to peer, right? And so, just because someone has a title doesn't make them an expert anymore. And so young people are less likely to go seek religious authority. They're more likely to seek spiritual wisdom. And they may find that spiritual wisdom anywhere. They may find it with their friends. They may find it in their classrooms. They may find it in film. Why is it that Marvel movies, if you look at like the highest grossing movies of all time, probably half of the top 10 are Marvel movies? Why? Because Marvel movies are a modern day mythology that provide the same things to young people that Greek and Hindu and other mythological traditions have provided to people across space and time. Mythology is a language for our hopes, dreams, values, and ethics. In some ways, mythology is more accurate than history. History is a particular perspective from a winner. Mythology is more like the ethos of a place and time. And because people don't have traditional religion, the Marvel universe has replaced that as these sort of morality tales. Every Marvel movie, which is, a mythological sort of structure, talks about good and evil and right and wrong and what it means to be human and what is our responsibility to each other, and with great power comes great responsibility, etc. These are things that mythology has always provided people, that parables have always provided people. It's just looking for a different place. And so I think what we see is that young people want to find the same things that their parents and grandparents found: meaning, purpose, community, transcendence, awe, joy, ritual, pilgrimage. But it's not going to happen in the same way that it happened for their parents and grandparents.
Thanks, Varun. What you just now said sort of reminds me of way back. I don't know, maybe it was 30 years ago. Dr. Herbert Benson, he wrote this book on relaxation response, and he was the guy who actually made transcendental meditation and meditation very popular in the United States. And one of the things that he says there is that you don't have to sit cross-legged and close your eyes and do whatever you have to do and chant Om or anything else, or Jesus or any other name, Ram, and so on. You can even use a word like one, or you can use a word like Coca-Cola, whatever it may be, and it'll still take you into that deeper space. But he said, be aware of this, that the attribute that you attach to that particular word that you are internalizing is going to be what you're going to be experiencing within you. And so the reason why the Hindus chant the name of Krishna or Rama, whoever, Shiva, or the Muslims about Allah and Christians about Jesus, is that the attributes that they attach to that and how do they see them as those metaphors that you would like to be. It is something similar to what just now you said. And so for me, I'm non-religious as I would like to profess. But when I hear a song about Krishna, tears come into my eyes because it's something that is far higher. It transcends all those cognitive kind of reservations that I have into something much deeper in my life. And you know that Lisa Miller has said that at least 33% of us have in our genes that aspect of faith and spirituality, and that is born within with a number of people. Now, I just would like to move to something a little more application oriented as such. Today, apart from multiple other things that we find, like you said, the crisis of joy, the crisis of loneliness, the depression, even suicidal tendency that you spoke about last time when we spoke here. At the end of the day, everybody would like to be successful in life. They define their success in their own way. They would like to be joyful, or in their own way, but they like to be happy. And so when they move out of their schools and colleges into the workplace or life place, the world outside, if they have to cope and manage and be successful, how could this value of spirituality be sort of absorbed by them in a way that would help them in that quest?
I think it can help by redefining what it means to be successful. I think for our students, there's a very myopic understanding of what success means. And like I said, it's mostly based on what other people say. Success is getting a good grade that someone on a test that someone else gives me in grades. Success is getting a job that someone else gives me. The success is getting the girl or the guy who says yes to me. Success is impressing someone I don't know, right? Success is what I put on a resume, which are metrics that the external world judges. But what does my personal or spiritual or internal success look like? I ask our students to keep an internal resume that only they see, that measures things that maybe they should think of in terms of success. Why is friendship not success? Why is bravery not success? Why is courage or empathy or service not success? Why is failing and learning from failure not success, right? Why are the things that we might think of as successful not considered successful? And so what I encourage students to do is when they think about a internal resume, to list the metrics of success that we might call spiritual: meaning making, community building, awe. Like, did you make a friend? Put it on your resume. Did you have a moment of transcendence? Put it on your resume. Did you take a risk? Put it on your resume. Did you put yourself in an uncomfortable position, fail and learn? Did you fail forward? Put it on your resume. So I think that what spirituality can do is help us redefine the metrics of success. So it's not just based on what other people in the external world think of us, but what we think of ourselves, what our own values are, what our own aspirations are, to honor how we feel about ourselves at least as much as we honor how other people feel about us, to define for ourselves what success is at least as much as how other people define success for us, and to spend time doing the things that move our spirit at least as much as we spend time doing the things that impress other people. Why do I spend so much time studying for a test to impress someone else and so little time hanging out with people that I love? How does that make any sense, right? Why don't I spend as much time in friendship as I spend in school? Our students, by the time they graduate, have spent 18 straight years in school, all to take tests to impress people they don't know, to get jobs that will be given to them by people who they don't know. And almost no part of that 18 years is focused on what does success mean to you? What moves your spirit? What does it mean to be successful in the art of living? What are your real assets and truth claims? This is why I love the Indian approach, because, Rabindranath Tagore, like Shantiniketan, was a school focused on the art of living. Sri Sri Ravi Shankar talks about the art of living. Why are we not talking about success in the art of living as a kind of success, and only success in the professional or academic world is the type of success? That's not the way that the Indian Varna ashrama system thinks about success, by the way. Only one, the first part is brahmachari, which is academic. The second part is grahastha, which might be material. But the vanaprastha, after you do brahmachari and grahastha, you have vanaprastha and sannyas. Those are not the metrics of success that are name and form based on the external conditions of the world. Your ultimate measures of success within a Indian spiritual idea of your own life is also based on seva and renunciation and personal growth and resiliency and transformation and non-attachment. Yet those are never things that we tell young people to focus on. They're never things that we're rewarded on a resume. They're never things that are rewarded in terms of pay, compensation, or career, right? And so I think spirituality compels us to think about different metrics of success. And it's a necessary complement and a critical complement to a world that's pushing us only to a capitalist idea of success and not to a spiritualist idea of success. And I think you have to have both if you're going to be a fully realized human being. You have to make your way in the world. Of course, you have to earn your keep and support your family, but you also have to fulfill your own spiritual, you have to fill your own spiritual cup too. You have to move your own spirit too. We have one chance at this life. It has to be inspiring for us too. We have to have some say over what makes us successful too. We can't just outsource that to the gatekeepers of the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, some of the things that you said in terms of how do you define success, in terms of the meaning that holds for you. And today, more and more psychological studies and neuroscientific studies are proving that it's not about money, it's not about pleasure, and these have all limits to greed. And it's something far more, like you said, vanaprastha as well as the sannyasa, which is, in a sense, about relating to yourself, but in that relating to yourself, you start to sort of relate to the larger society, not just those who are immediately connected to you in a selfish manner. In fact, yesterday we had Dr. Dana Zohar, who talked about quantum spirituality and quantum management and stuff like that. And one of the most powerful parts of that was the application of that in corporate units. For example, in Haier in China, which took over GE appliances in the United States and made it a success, their whole philosophy is built around what is called the zero distance, which is about minimizing the gap between the customer and yourself, in a very much what you say about seva, but in a slightly different sense. It's service, but how do we provide that service and still be able to get value for ourselves? And tomorrow we have Dr. D.V. Rao, who's coming to talk a little bit more about, a slightly different context of education. But here the question really is, with your vast experience in the educational space, in order to have these young people coming out of college and schools and to be facing life where the questions are going to be different, how do we ground them, anchor them, as you said earlier, not negative outcomes, but in terms of positive outcomes, of saying, this is what success means to you? Is there a way of doing that?
At our elite universities, I think the way to do it is actually, and maybe ironically, through the classroom. It may not seem that that's the right place to do it, but that's the way students are oriented. And so it maybe shouldn't surprise us that the most popular class in the history of Harvard University, over 350-year history, is a class called positive psychology, which is how do you be part of the change in your own life towards thriving and flourishing. The most popular class right now at Yale University is an elective called the Science of Well-Being. How do you achieve happiness in your life? It's got like 1,200 kids and 1 million online are taking it. The most popular class right now at Stanford University, a campus which is over 40% computer scientists and engineers, is a class called Design Your Life, How to Live a Meaningful Life. The most popular class at USC right now is a class called The Leap, which is about how to change your mindset. It's basically about growth mindset. So the most popular class at the most elite university, the most popular classes at the most elite universities are classes in joy or well-being or how to find community or how to change your mindset. They're not classes in technical skills. They're classes in mindset. And so I think that's where students, that's where you legitimize the conversation. It's one thing to say, follow your joy. It's another thing to give someone a grade in a class about joy. Because in some ways, for students who are raised in terms of, you know, um, the university or academia as the legitimizing sort of factor of any conversation, by putting it in a curriculum, you legitimize it for students. And so I'd like to see more curricular opportunities for students to think about joy and meaning making in their life, to legitimize it as a class in the same way we legitimize the study of history or the study of economics or the study of biology. Why shouldn't the study of joy or meaning making be legitimized in the same way? It's equally as important as art history, right? But why do we have an art history department and not a joy department, right? And so I would like to see that movement happen curricularly, and I'd like to see it happen in younger and younger ages. And I'm starting to see it a little bit, like, my daughter and your granddaughter go to school together. And like their school, they have social emotional learning, they do mindfulness in the classroom, they do stretching, they do gratitude, they're way more, you know, uh, evolved at that age than we were at that age, built into a curricular structure. It's not like they're opting into anything. This is just what it means to be a kid growing up now. But they also have more challenges than we ever had, especially around social media and around polarization and around siloed thinking and around misinformation and around anxiety and at some point around artificial intelligence. And so the skills that we're trying to give them at a young age are necessary skills. It's not a luxury at this point.
Is this course Leap? Is that the one that you teach, or is that somebody else teaching?
A friend of mine, I teach a few classes. That's not my course, but I guest lecture in that class.
Yeah.
And there's just some amazing people who come into that class. It's like the sexiest class in America, Quincy Jones, Mark Cuban, Kobe Bryant, Ariana Huffington, Pete Carroll, the Brene Brown, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Like the list of people who speak in this class is really extraordinary. And what I find is everyone who comes to this class is very famous. And the students who come, want to meet famous people and they're inspired by them. And almost everyone who comes to the class, and it's not because they're asked to do this, it's because this is what they end up doing. Almost everyone who comes to this class talks about failure. They don't talk about their success. Everyone who comes to this class as a student wants to hear about the success stories, and what they hear about are the failures. And I love that. I love that naturally all the most successful people in the world who come speak in this class and they want to impart wisdom to students, they all come to the same place without a prompt, which is the most important thing is how you fail, not how you succeed, because you cannot succeed unless you fail. And the people who fail spectacularly succeed spectacularly. And it's a story that students really need to hear. And so that's the class called the Leap. But it's like I said, it's a class that's predicated on the idea that your mindset is more important than your skill set.
Thank you. So finally, I know that you wanted to go a little early, and the last question I really have is something that we discussed earlier when we talked about the crisis of suicidal tendencies, depression, and so on, how you felt that because of the fact that counseling, therapy, and so on had limited amount of success, coaching could be of value. If that's still your thought process, in what way can both the concept of self-coaching as well as coaching others be of value in whatever you are trying to do in achieving joy in your campus?
Yeah, I think self-coaching, like I said, is an upstream approach. It's not, we do it not because we're broken, but we do it so that we don't break, and in some ways it's like going to the gym. Our students go to the gym not because they are in health crisis. They go to the gym so that they don't go into health crisis. They go into the gym as a preventative measure. There's no stigma about going to the gym to stay healthy. There should be no stigma about doing other practices, going to a mental health kind of gym, like a self-coaching opportunity. that we do not because we're in crisis, but as a way to make sure we don't go into crisis. This is the upstream approach. And so I think self-coaching goes to the wholeness of the human experience. It can be an approach that honors the mental, spiritual, physical, emotional sort of components of our being. And it can bring us into a community of like-minded people where we can actually have reflective, contemplative sorts of opportunities to think about who we are. But what does the future look like? I mean, I hate to be sort of dystopian about it, but I think that maybe the future is artificial intelligence. Given how I did an event with Sam Altman a few weeks ago, and given how quickly everything is moving in artificial intelligence, it's hard to think that artificial intelligence isn't going to be deployed in some way to help solve the crisis of loneliness that social media created. And so we may be chasing our tail, trying to deploy one technology to solve the problem that was created by a different technology. But I think I said this last time I was here. What we find is that young people trust bots more than they trust humans, because the bot doesn't judge them. The bot shows up for them. The bot asks them how their day was. The bot checks in on them. The humans don't check in on them. The bots don't let them down. The humans let them down. And so when we saw the release of the new Chat GPT 4.0 this week, we began to see the applications of companionship, honestly, and the ability of AI to be a friend to people in need in a non-judgmental way, in a way that we hope humans could be to each other, but maybe aren't. And so I think that AI is going to really shape everything from how we work to how we learn to how we love. And part of that will be companionship. And part of it will be thinking about what it really means to be human. Rumi said the only reason there is counterfeit gold is because there's real gold to be copied. The only reason there's artificial intelligence is because there's human intelligence to be copied. Artificial intelligence is a function of human intelligence. And so if we're getting to a point where artificial intelligence, we're going to get AGI soon, where artificial intelligence will be not only smarter than the smartest person who's ever lived, but will be smarter than all the smartest people who have ever lived combined, will be an expert in everything. We teach students, the way our education system is set up is to teach students how to be smart and how to be experts. But if AI is going to be smarter than the smartest humans who have ever lived and more of an expert than any human who will ever live, and if like 20% of our childhood education is based on foreign language training, and if AI is going to allow us to do real-time bi-directional translation, we're going to have to rethink how we even teach students. Like once students had calculators, we didn't teach complex math. So are we going to teach all the things that ChatGPT already knows, or are we going to teach other things? My sense is what makes us human and what differentiates us from AI is more the spiritual aspects of our existence. We are self-aware. We think about life and death. We think about mortality. We think about hunger and sex. We have fear and we have hope. AI thinks about none of that and has none of those things. And so I think what it really means to be human is going to be, in many ways, clarified through artificial intelligence. And we're going to have to focus on educating young people in the art of what it means to be human, which is spiritual, consciousness, self-reflective, ethical, creative, right? Because that's the stuff that differentiates us from AI. And so I think as you think about coaching, as you think about self-coaching, AI is going to be front and center. This stuff is going to move with light speed. A year from now, we're going to have a whole different conversation than we had a year ago when it comes to AI. And it can be dystopian or it can be utopian. The choice is ours, right? The choice is ours. It's a tool, and now we have to figure out how to best deploy it.
I completely 100% agree with you. It's not dystopian. It's completely utopian. It's not even really utopian. It's real. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's already happening today. The funny part of it is that when we discussed last time, for instance, you mentioned that many people think that it's a social media which is breaking up the relationships, but actually it's the other way around. The relationships are already broken. Young people do not have faith in their families anymore, their relationships, their religion, and so on and so forth. And so they go to complete strangers whom they have never met and that they are meeting in social media. So, so we are blaming the social media for having led to that by ourselves, by our own actions. Thank you, Varun. Guys, I promised
Thanks,
Varun
everyone.
that leave him on a little bit early because he has a hard stop. He has to travel about two hours from now. So thank you very, very much indeed for this wonderful session with you. And we hope to have many more with you. Bye. Take care.
Appreciate it.
All the best.
Thank you.
Dean of
Thank you.
Joy, VP of Joy.
I'm going to make it happen. Yeah.
Bye.